4.7, Solving quadratic equations with complex solutions. Example 1, solve each equation. So letter A, x squared plus 9 equals 0. In order to solve this, we're going to go back and we're going to think about our methods and we're going to decide which one would work the best. We have solved by factoring, we have solved by square root, we have solved by completing the square, we have solved by graphing, and we have solved with quadratic formula. If I'm looking at letter A, I'm noticing that there's no b term, so I'm going to choose solve by square root. In order to do that, we have to isolate the x squared. So we're going to subtract 9, which leaves us with x squared equals negative 9. Then in order to get rid of the squared, we're going to take a square root. Remember, the square and the square root cancel, so x equals, and now we're taking the square root of a negative number. So keep in mind the negative is going to come out and become an I, and then we're going to have the square root of 9. The square root of 9 is simply 3, so x equals 3i. But don't forget, when you solve a square root, you also have to consider the negative version, so x also equals negative 3i. Letter B, x squared plus 4x plus 5 equals 0. This does have a b term, so I'm not going to solve by square root. But if I'm looking at the leading coefficient is positive 1, and the b term is even. So I know we don't like to all the time, but completing the square would be a good option here to practice. So I'm going to subtract 5, x squared plus 4x equals negative 5. Now, all of my x's are on the left, all of my constants are on the right. We can add our blanks. X squared plus 4x plus blank equals negative 5 plus blank. Then we come back and we split our b term in half, circle it, and then square it. So 2 squared is 4. Then we're going to factor the left. And remember, that's going to factor into x something squared. And that 2 that we circled, which is a positive 2, just falls into place. Equals, and then over here we have a negative 5 plus 4, which is negative 1. At this point, we solve by square root. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. The squared cancels the square root. X plus 2 equals the square root of negative 1. Well, the square root of negative 1 is I. And then keep in mind, we also have x plus 2 equals negative I. Then I'm going to subtract 2. So x equals, and at this point I have I minus 2, but standard form, the real part has to come first. So negative 2 plus I is our first solution. And then subtract 2. So x equals negative 2 minus I is our second solution. And then we can either just leave it like that, or if you had solved it a different way, or if you wanted to condense those, you could write x equals negative 2, because they're both a negative 2, and then this one's a plus I, and this one's a minus I, so plus or minus I. That would just be the same way of writing your answer. Letter C, 5x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. We're not going to solve by square root because there's a b term. I'm not going to solve by completing the square because the a is not a positive 1, so I don't want to have to deal with this. I could probably solve this by graphing because it's already equal to 0, but given that these are imaginary solutions, it's probably not going to hit the x-axis. So at this point, I'm going to choose quadratic formula. It's already equal to 0. A, B, C. A is 5, B is negative 4, C is 1. So x equals the opposite of b, which is 4, plus or minus the square root in parentheses, negative 4 squared minus 4 times 5 times 1, all over 2 times 5. X equals 4 plus or minus. I'm still going to put my square root. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. Then I'm going to grab my calculator, and I'm only simplifying what's underneath. So we've got -4 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 5 times 1, which gives me -4. And then all over 10. At this point, I'm going to take a look at my square root, which breaks down into a 2 and a 2. The other way I can think about that is the square root of 4 is 2, but keep in mind we have the negative here, so we're going to have an I. So we're going to have x equals 4 plus or minus. Our square root is going to break down into a 2i over 10. At this point, I could break it into two separate equations, but I don't need to. Everything can divide by 2. So if I divide this by 2, I'm going to get 2. If I divide this by 2, I'm going to get just I. If I divide this by 2, I'm going to get 5. So my solution here is going to be 2 plus or minus I over 5. And I'm just going to leave both of my solutions like that.